It's now 7:04, and I think most of us have probably gotten in here. So I'll go ahead and start and try to, as usual, try to be as brief as possible. But thank you all for coming in here tonight. I'm Bill Seacrest with the Fresno County Public Library's Heritage Center. And as you all know, tonight we're here to discuss the story of Highway 180. One of the most fascinating stories to be found anywhere within Fresno County's boundaries. And our speaker tonight, Jim Spitze, has done a wonderful job of putting that story together end to end, so we can all enjoy it. And now it's in it as of yesterday. He just received the printing order on his doorstep, and he informed me before we started that a third of the print run is now accounted for. And so if you're interested in a copy, I advise you to get a hold of it fast. He'll give you more details on how to do that as we go along. But anyway, the book is out, and Jim is here to tell us all about it and give the highlights. I know go back with him, I think about 3 years. He came into the Heritage Center one day and was asking if I knew where Bill Seacrest was. And I said, well, you found him. And he said, well, I need to talk to you. And then he explained to me what was going on. And I thought, oh, this is an incredible project. And so we've had many discussions in the ensuing time about the project and finding where to find a photo or illustration and where to verify different facts and everything else. It's been an incredible journey through research and history. And now this has all come to fruition, and needless to say, we're all quite excited about it. So before we start, I'll just give everybody a handful of quick advisements. What I'd like you to do, if you have a question, is just go ahead and drop it into the chat box, and then we'll take care of all the questions at the end of Jim's presentation. That'll make everything nice and orderly. And then if you can keep quiet during the presentation so everybody can hear what's going on, I'd appreciate that very much. And then finally, we always get asked, are you going to record the program? So if I have to go somewhere or I want to tip off one of my friends to see it later, can we do that? And the answer is yes. This will eventually, if you can give us several days, end up on the Fresno County Public Library's YouTube channel. And if you go to YouTube and search for our precise name, you'll find the channel without any difficulty. And like I said, if you give it several days, this program will show up. And we now have a couple of other local history night presentations on there about pioneer aviation and hidden aspects of Fresno County's history. So those you might want to take a look at as well. So I've done my piece, and let me give it over to Jim, and he will tell you about the amazing history of Highway 180.
Okay, Bill, thank you very much for inviting me to do this evening. 2 days ago, I would have been unable to give this talk with quite the confidence I can this evening. Yesterday, at 3 p.m., a large truck arrived at our home and delivered 1,097 copies of this. That is the book. In a few minutes, I had opened one of the 78 boxes of books and had in my hands an actual copy. Lovely dust jacket, beautifully hardbound, and with Henry Provost's photographs of yokuts and Western Mono woven baskets, and with Pamela Cosehill's gorgeous photographs of Sierra Nevada wildflowers beautifully reproduced in full and excellent color. I had been worried, but with the book in my hands, I knew we had created something rather special. In late 2018, my wife asked me for help with a small guidebook to be issued by the Sierra Gateway Trust for travelers on the then new state designated Scenic Highway 180 from just east of Centerville all the way to Zumwalt Meadow at the eastern end of Kings Canyon. Some 70 miles of truly stunning scenic beauty. It sounded simple, sort of a mile by mile guide to what I already knew was a quite beautiful road. However, as I started writing, I kept encountering questions. Who was Minkler? Why is Centerville called Centerville? The more I dug, the deeper the pit became. Local historians told me I absolutely, positively had to mention Sontag and Evans. The more I dug, the deeper the pit became. Local historians told me I absolutely, positively had to mention Sontag and Evans, the Dalton Gang, the Flume, and the Hume Bennett Lumber Company, Campbell of Mount Campbell, and Jesse Morrow of Jesse Morrow Mountain. And then I encountered the stories of Moses Church and Yank Hazelton, and it became clear that a dam had burst. As word of the project got out, Visalia's premier wildflower photographer, Pamela Cosehill, loaned us her entire 30-year plus collection of magnificent Sierra Nevada wildflower photographs on 3 jam-packed CDs. Then the National Park Service invited us to visit their archives in 3 Rivers, where they scanned and gave us a PDF file of the entire documentary history of the building of the road from Grant Grove to Cedar Grove and beyond that to Zumwalt Meadow. The Bancroft Library at Cal Berkeley gave us hands-on access to a never before published manuscript by Moses Church. The area's pioneer families have been incredibly generous. The Cravens, the Jennings, the Clarks, the Metcalfs, the Overholzers, the Salwassers, and others. Scott Haugland of the Sanger Historical Society loaned us on 15 CDs what seems to be close to the entire photo archive of the Sanger Historical Society. And Ken Zeck did the same regarding the Reedley Historical Society. The much respected irrigation consulting firm of Provost and Pritchard, in the person of its founder, Jim Provost, opened its archives that proved to have what we believe is the only known copy of an essential chronology of this area's irrigation history. Finally, as the frontispiece for our book, a private collector offered to have a rarely seen and quite valuable pencil sketch of the famous Yocut basket weaver Ida Eco, to have the sketch removed from its frame and the protective layer of glass taken off so our professional photographer could properly photograph it. A unique book was evolving, but it was a cluttered collection of disconnected stories in no special sequence. I sat down one weekend and put everything into chronological order. A chapter on our area's first inhabitants, the Yokuts and the Western Monos. Then a chapter for the 44 years of Spanish rule and the 24 years of Mexican rule. And then a chapter for the now 175 years of American rule. I took all of the stories about our area's pioneers and gave them their own chapter, titled, not too amazingly, Our Pioneers, and provided its own chapter for Henry Provost's lovely photographs of two stunning collections of Yokuts and Western Mono baskets, and a similar chapter for Pamela Coe's Hills, lovely photographs of our area's gorgeous wildflowers. I squeezed in a chapter on two disconnected things, the Butterfield stage line and our area's wineries, four of which were, in their time, the world's largest, with the fourth, the E&J Gallo Winery at the northeast corner of Clovis Avenue and Highway 180, still holding that title today. I ended the book with two chapters. A short chapter on the big trees, who discovered them, how they were named, especially the naming of the Grant tree, with the chapter concluding with the full and long forgotten story of the annual trek to the tree. And then a final chapter, the 50-page mile by mile guide that was the book's original purpose. In writing this, I tried to take a light hand, to let the pioneers speak for themselves. And in large part, I think I succeeded. The only chapter I think that a reader might find slow going is the one on the Yokuts and the Western Monos. They were the inhabitants of this area for well over 1,000 years, but left few signs of their presence and virtually nothing in writing, except for the far too few oral histories compiled by Frank Lotta and one or two others. While working on this chapter, I was honored to welcome to our home Dirk Charlie, the tribal elder of the Dunlap Band of Western Monos. He gave me some important insights, but an engaging story on their lives and times has yet to be written. The book has 9 chapters, plus a preface and a lengthy bibliography. With the help of Charles Fullhaber, the former director of the Bancroft Library, every single fact, no matter how trivial, that I state in the text is carefully but inobtrusively endnoted as to the source at the end of each chapter, which should keep a lot of historians happy. This has been a fun project, and for the most part, I think the result is fun to read. It has been from the start a team effort. In the years to come, I will look back on this with much fondness for the many fine people I met along the way. I hope my book is of a quality that shows I listened. Now, I'd like to read a few extracts from the book to give you a better feel for its contents. First, most of us speak English with an American accent and not a British accent. That is because on July 7th of 1846, Commodore Sloat lowered the Mexican flag at Monterey and raised the Stars and Stripes. 2 days later, our flag was raised in San Francisco and Sonoma. And 2 more days later, it was raised at Sutter's Fort. From that time forward, California has been a part of the United States of America. But Commodore Sloat was just 9 days ahead of Admiral Seymour of Her Britannic Majesty's entire Pacific Fleet. Seymour, on board his flagship, the Collingwood, had orders to, quote, take Monterey and all of California, unquote. Quoting an officer on board the Collingwood, when we were near Point Pinos, the admiral came on deck and manifested a great deal of anxiety and gave strict orders to the quartermaster, who carried the spyglass, to keep a sharp lookout when rounding the point. As the Collingwood made the turn and was sailing in, the admiral in sharp tones said, "Quartermaster, do you see a flag flying on shore?" The latter replied, "Yes, sir, but I cannot make it out, sir." The admiral, becoming more excited, kept repeating the question sharply and received the same answer. At last he said again, "Quartermaster, do you see a flag on shore now?" The quartermaster, shadowing his eyes and stooping a little and getting a view under the fog, replied, "Yes, sir, I see a flag very clearly now, sir." "What flag is it?" asked the admiral. The quartermaster replied, "It is the American flag, sir." Upon which the admiral slapped his thigh, stamped his foot, and passionately exclaimed in disappointment, "Then, by God, I am too late." Admiral Seymour and the English Pacific Fleet arrived in the harbor of Monterey on July 16th, 1846, just 9 days after Sloat had raised the Stars and Stripes. With apologies to those who hate alliterations, Sloat and his boat had won the race. Admiral Seymour visited Commodore Sloat during his fleet's brief stay in Monterey. He was courteous, but disappointed. Now I'm going to read a historic quote that many of us have heard of, but very few of us have ever heard the actual content. On December 5th of 1848, President Polk presented his 4th annual message to a joint session of Congress. Several pages into his otherwise rather boring message, he spoke as follows. It was known that mines of the precious metals existed in a considerable extent in California at the time of its acquisition. Recent discoveries render it probable that these mines are more extensive and valuable than was anticipated. The accounts of the abundance of gold in that territory are of such an extraordinary character as would scarcely command belief were they not corroborated by the authentic reports of officers in the public service who have visited the mineral district and derived the facts which they detail from personal observation. The explorations already made warrant the belief that the supply is very large and that gold is found at various places in an extensive district of country. End of quote. With those stunning words, the great California gold rush of 1849 began. Roads were built. William Campbell provided ferry service across the Kings River at a spot soon called Campbell's Crossing, and then called Scottsburg, and then Centerville. In spite of recurring floods, Centerville grew, and by the mid-1860s was the unquestioned center of activity in this area. However, in 1868, a British investor, A.Y. Easterby, purchased 4 sections of dry, barren land in Fresno County, bounded today by Belmont to the north, Clovis Avenue to the east, California to the south, and Chestnut to the west. He had the land plowed, seeded with wheat, and fenced, but there was no water. Easterby and Moses Church purchased 2 small ditches that were diverting water from the Kings River near Centerville. They merged the ditches, increased their capacity, and extended them westward to the dry bed of Fancher Creek, which abutted the east boundary of Easterby's 2,500 acres. Remarkably swiftly, Kings River water was flowing to Easterby's land, and a rich harvest was in the offing. The Central Pacific Railway began a line through the Central Valley from San Francisco to Los Angeles shortly after completing its part of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869. In November of 1871, Leland Stanford, one of the big 4 of the Central Pacific, saw A.Y. Easterby's Banner Ranch for the first time. There he saw 2,000 plus acres of lush grain on what once had been a dry desert plain, but was now irrigated by Church's canals. Stanford, overwhelmed by this accomplishment and the potential for the area, said, quote, "Wonderful, here we must build the town," unquote. The station building at Sycamore, now Herndon, on the San Joaquin River, a few miles to the north, was abandoned, and the station relocated to within sight of Easterby's Banner Ranch. Shortly thereafter, a small wood frame depot was constructed, and a community named Fresno by the railroad began to grow. The first train pulled into the new Fresno station on May 28th of 1872. The decline of Centerville had begun. In 1888, the Southern Pacific Railroad elected to build its rail line through the far smaller neighboring town of Sanger. The effect of the boom in Sanger was to depopulate Centerville. Then in 1889, the Kings River Lumber Company elected to build its huge mill in Sanger, continuing a decline from which Centerville has never recovered. By the 1890s, dams for the storage of water became an important topic as the entire San Joaquin Valley was transformed from a dry, barren plain to one of our planet's truly spectacular and hugely productive agricultural areas. In 1902, the U.S. Geological Survey published a major report entitled Storage of Water on Kings River, California, by Joseph Barlow Lippincott. Numerous dam sites were carefully surveyed, and several sites were recommended. One dam was quickly built, but on a smaller scale than recommended. We know it today as Hume Lake. A second site encountered a half-century delay. We know it today as Pine Flat. A third site, the most fully examined and most strongly recommended in the Lippincott report, entailed 3 separate dams, one between Jesse Morrow Mountain and Mount Campbell, a second between Mount Campbell and Granite Hill, and a third eastward to an unnamed western extension of the foothills, a huge reservoir extending from the southern slopes of Mount Campbell all the way north to the southern slopes of Tivy Mountain. Another dam of some interest was proposed, a 150-foot high dam at Cedar Grove at the west end of Kings Canyon. I quote an amazing letter found in the National Park Archives, wherein the Forest Service, which had been pushing for the dam, was in effect told to get with the program. The road was going to be built to the floor of the canyon and not to some point 150 feet above that floor, period. End of message. Oh, and furthermore, they had better pay their share of the cost. And of course, that is indeed exactly what happened. Actually, I quote from an entire series of letters about the road from Grant Grove to Cedar Grove and beyond that to Zumwalt Meadow. I describe the convict workforce and their camp, now called Convict Flat. It's a fascinating story, just one of many stories that I tell about the Georgettis, about Moses Church and his farmer versus cattleman dispute with the Hazelton and Akers families, as beautifully described in a long handwritten manuscript found in the Bancroft Library at Cal Berkeley, about the ditches and canals and water districts that have transformed a once dry, barren plain into one of our planet's truly great agricultural areas. And finally, I tell about a road from Oak to Pine to Timberline that ends at our nation's second and third national parks, 1 hour and about 50 miles from here. Let me restate that. Just 1 hour from downtown Fresno, in normal traffic and without a heavy foot on the accelerator, is the General Grant tree, perhaps the most famous single tree in the world, our nation's Christmas tree, one of the world's largest living things, and since 1956, a presidentially designated shrine to our nation's war dead. The tree was given its name by Mrs. Lucretia Baker of Visalia. She was a member of a group which camped near the towering redwood in August 1867. The Civil War was over. Abraham Lincoln had been assassinated. Andrew Johnson was the president of the United States. Ulysses S. Grant was perhaps our nation's most respected citizen. Mrs. Baker much admired General Grant and decided to write to him telling him that she had named the great tree in his honor. The following was his reply to her letter. Headquarters, Armies of the United States, Washington, D.C., October 4th, 1867. My dear Madam, your favor of the 5th of September by express, accompanying a box containing branches, etc., from the largest tree in California, and no doubt in the world, which 2 partial friends have done me the honor to name after me, is at hand. Please accept my thanks for thus remembering me, and also for the kind expression of regard contained in your letter. With great respect, your obedient servant, U.S. Grant, General. Today, the General Grant tree is a symbol for all that is right and good about our great country. The General Grant Grove section of Kings Canyon National Park was our nation's third national park, coming just 5 days after Sequoia in 1890. General Grant National Park was greatly expanded in 1940 to encompass much of Kings Canyon, finally fulfilling the wish of John Muir, who 50 years earlier had described the Great Canyon as follows, quote, "In the vast Sierra wilderness, far to the southward of the famous Yosemite Valley, there is a yet grander valley of the same kind. It is situated on the south fork of the Kings River, above the most extensive groves of giant sequoias and beneath the shadows of the highest mountains in the range, where the canyons are deepest and the snow-laden peaks are crowded most closely together. It is called Kings Canyon. The extraordinary visible treasures within a short drive deserve much wider recognition. The vast fields of wildflowers, the almost palpable serenity of Clark's Valley, and so much, much more. My book brings together the wonderful stories of this special place. I do not know if it will help give our area's long hidden treasures the visibility they so richly deserve, but it might. Thank you. And now, are there any questions?
Anyone can go ahead and submit questions via chat.
Silence.
Nobody has anything? Jim, while we wait and see if, and she took the words right out of my mouth. Where's the book available for sale? That's what I was going to ask you to make sure that we had that base covered.
It's available in no bookstores as yet. We are working with the Sequoia Conservancy to make it available in the book centers, in the visitors centers. The best way to get it right now is to send an email to Bill, and then he can forward it to me, or I can give you my email address. The price of the book is $29.95. People have said I should have priced it. We should have priced it higher, plus sales tax, which is 7.975, since our legal point of sale is physically right here. Plus, I can mail it. It's $4.75 for one book and $2.75 for each additional book. I hope you got all that. I will send all of this to Bill and then he can forward it. We are having a book signing party at the Pendragon Brewery in Sanger from 2 to 4 on June 26th. And you can look up Pendragon. I'll send Bill the information on that too. And you are certainly welcome to come to that. The Sierra Gateway Trust has promised to provide nibbles. I have promised to provide a very short talk, which my wife has already heard and agreed that it's sufficiently short. And so the books will be available there, which is only 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks and 2 days. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Jim, once you get them delivered, once you get them delivered to the Reading Museum, they will be available Tuesday and Thursday mornings from 9 to noon at the Reading Museum. I believe we're going to price them around $32 or $33, something like that. It'll include tax.
Okay, that, yes, and the Reading Museum, I believe is going to be getting 50 copies of the book, something like that. And so they'll be available there. And
We're
that's,
easy to find under the water towers.
thank you, John. Anything else? What else? What could I say?
We got a couple of other things, but just so everybody knows, if you want to email me and I'll forward information about the book, the email address is William, regular spelling, .Secrest, SECREST, at Fresno Library, one word, .org. I'll repeat that real quick. William.Secrest at Fresno Library, one word, .org. So any questions, just go ahead and forward them. And we did get a couple of other questions while
Good.
you were giving the details, Jim. Do you have any photos that illustrate the story a little bit that happen to be within easy reach? Or can you even hold up the book as a...
Yeah, there are 143 illustrations in the book. And I can hold up a few things.
Please do.
All right, I'll show you wildflower photographs. Can you see those? It's their full page.
Yeah, if you could hold it up just a little bit more.
Okay.
There, that's better.
Okay.
Yes.
That's some of the wildflowers. There's many pages of that. Then we go to, there's some stunning photographs of Indian baskets. Here we go.
And just, there we go. That's good.
Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Then Reedley people provided some lovely photographs of, people have heard, you've probably, if you drive along 180, just east of Squaw Valley, you cross Elwood Road. Well, here are the Elwoods.
And a little bit up.
Yeah. And there's an interesting connection with Elwood and the an oil field down near Bakersfield. And that's all told in here. Here's the here we get back into the pioneers.
And if you could hold it up just a little bit more, there we go.
Okay. Overholser family. He was an early postmaster up there in Squaw Valley. That's him and his wife. And this is his signed certificate as postmaster. And that's from our chapter entitled Our Pioneers. There's a lot of photographs. Well, this one's sort of interesting. During the Civilian Conservation Corps era.
Yeah, that's good right there. Thanks.
Okay. The young men could complete their high school education and get a high school certificate. And the graduation ceremonies were typically given at the base of the General Grant tree. But this particular photograph is at the base of the General Robert E. Lee tree, because most of the graduates were from the South. And a little anecdote of history. And from the Reedley, they gave us some beautiful photographs of the two. There's quite a story about the Mennonites in Reedley. And so these are the two churches, the two different portions of the Mennonite church. On the right, you probably can't see it very well. You might.
It's pretty good right there. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Before there was a road in Cedar Grove to the end at Zumwalt Meadow, there was a trail, a horse trail that was rather well maintained. And so in 1912, they actually built a rather substantial bridge across the Kings River, not for cars, but for horses. And so this is, we actually have two photographs in the book of the building of that bridge. So that's some of the photographs. There's a photograph of the Smith family that built a major ferry crossing on the Kings River where Reedley now stands. Well, I don't know how many people have been to the Minkler Cash store, but we have to show that.
Yeah.
When my wife and I were married, Grace Russell was the person who was running the Minkler Cash store, and we still have her wedding present, and that's from 54 years ago. These are sort of cute. There's some more photographs. You see them. Let's see here. The photographs of there's four young ladies from the 1890s from Sanger. Above that, I think that is Sanger Motorcycle Club, 1915. On the right, this side, is an actual receipt from the Hume Bennett Lumber Company. And that was in the family trunk of our photographer, Henry Provost. So that's, and you know, this, I don't want you to see all the photographs, it took some time.
I think that's a decent selection. And Jim, I had another request. If you could show the front cover of the book, so everybody, we didn't get a, but anyway, yeah, that's good. But for everybody who's curious, that's what the book looks like, and a beautiful design it is.
I'll try to show you that this is this stunning frontispiece. I don't know how well this. I was particularly pleased when we got the book yesterday of the binding, and I'm going to take the book out of. This is what the physical thing looks like. There you go. It's really, they did a beautiful job. It's beautifully bound, and it really feels like what I hoped it would feel like. So anyway, any more questions?
Oh, yes, we've got several in the hopper. One is wondering what your motivation was for writing this book, and why do you think Highway 180 has a significant history.
Well, it started as a simple guidebook, and it was going to be maybe 50 pages. It could have been stapled and so forth. My wife was heading a thing called the Sear Gateway Trust, which is devoted to really preserving 180 as a scenic highway. And so she asked me if I could do that. And I said, sure, And I started working on it. And as I said in the talk, it got totally out of hand. I started digging into things, who is Minkler? Well, I actually met with one of the descendants. Then Centerville, it's trivial small community now, but its name is just scattered all over the early history of this area. When the Cravens came here, they came from the first Craven, Joshua Craven, came here from Placerville. And he headed for a place called Centerville, because that was about the only place at that time that had a name in this area. So you start say, well, you just can't talk about something and not tell something about it. And my hobby is, or I enjoy history, and so I just started typing. And as I said, it got out of hand. The book is about 90,000 words, and it weighs almost 3 pounds, 2.9. But we have Sontag. The only thing I put in the book and then removed because it's so well covered everywhere else, and that is the Fresno scraper. So you will not find here any information on the Fresno scraper, but you will find probably enough information on Sontag and Evans. They were train robbers, but the more I read about them, Chris Evans gets a bad rap, and I think, I won't dwell on that, but I tried to make it a balanced story. And there's more. We talk about the Dalton gang and where they hid out on the Elwood Ranch and so forth. But the area, I guess I'd say I enjoy history. And when I started digging in here, I realized that the history here has never, particularly of the area of Stanger, Reedley, and going east up to Squaw Valley and Dunlap and Klingen's Junction, there's nothing really written about it, except there's one small and rather excellent book by Helen and Forrest Klingen called Oak to Pine to Timberline. I think it's available at the Reedley Museum. I know it was out of print for a while. It's small, it's thin, but it has an excellent bibliography at the end. Helen, I believe, was the primary writer. My wife and I met them. They were good friends of my wife's parents. It's a well-written book.
It is available at the Reedley Library. I'm looking at a whole stack of them right now.
Good. Excellent. So that's about it. The book took on a life of its own. So many people gave help. The Metcalfs, they wrote a history of their family and their family's acquisition of multiple ranches over multiple decades. The same is true of the Overholser family. the Overholzers didn't have any male offspring. They had female offspring, so their name doesn't come down to us. It's now the Williamses and the Mariscottis, Carol and Mariscotti. My wife and I visited them at their homes up in the Squaw Valley area. I could go on and on. So many people have helped with this thing. I actually at one point I was, what do you call it, up a creek without a paddle on the chronology of irrigation in this area. And of course, I had the book, Bringing Water to a Thirsty Land, but the details of the early history of ditch digging was just absolutely, and I use an appropriate word, murky. And I wasn't getting anywhere. And I found a reference to a report, and I checked with the Library of Congress, and the National Archives, and there was a possibility of a copy at the California Academy of Sciences in Golden Gate Park, but they couldn't find it. And so I was about to give up. And the reference to the report was in a thing written by Jim Provost, the founder of Provost and Pritchard, which is probably the premier irrigation consulting firm in this area. So I talked to his secretary. He had retired, and I explained the situation. And she said, well, why don't you call Jim? And here's his number. So I called him. And he answered, and he says, oh yeah, I remember writing that article. Jim, now, so there's two Jims involved, Jim Pritchard and me. And he says, Jim, take a look in the upper right-hand corner of that page. And he said, is there a number there? And I said, yeah, it's 8E-3 something. And he said, Jim, that's the archive number in my firm's archives. That report must be there. Call Gail, his secretary. And so I called her and I said, Gail, would you take a look at your archives? Actually, it was Jim's library. And so she goes out of her office, comes back and says, I have it in hand, Mr. Spitze. And I said, I'll be there in 45 minutes. And I go there, it's 400 pages thick. It's legal paper. And it has a big rolled map showing the ditches. A map that, as far as I know, no one else had ever seen before. It's the only known copy. And with her permission, and I left the office with the entire document and took it to a reproduction place that Bill Sechrist recommended to me. They made 3 jump drive copies of the whole thing. Plus they made a actual hard copy of this really big map. And it was just, it really did break the dam on providing an absolute rock solid, detailed history with the copies of documents signed way back, beautifully organized. And it's the only known copy, physical copy, but now there are 3. One that Bill has, one that I have, and one that the firm of Provost and Pritchard has. So probably won't get lost. But there's, the area is so rich, and the families, the Hazeltons are still here in this area. Our ranch is, what do you call it? We've leased the management of the ranch to the Hines family, and one of the father, his wife is a Hazelton. So this goes all the way back to 1850. So anyway, I think I've talked enough.
I just wanted to add a couple of other things. I think we seem to have gone through the questions. If anybody is interested in going to the House of Pendragon event, they're at 1849 Industrial Way, number 103 in
It's like we don't have an E.
1849 Industrial Way, number 103, Sanger.
Sorry.
Mr. Haugland, could you mute your microphone, please? And then we had another recommendation about the Cedar Brook book, which is somewhat along the 180 corridor, about excellent book about the Mennonites who built a cabin community in Pinehurst. We've got that in the library system, and if you go to our catalog and put in Cedar Brook as the title, you should be able to find it without too much trouble. But anyway, I think that that's about all we've got tonight. And again, I appreciate you coming by to tell us all about the book, Jim. And I know I'll be interested to see it when it comes out.
I'm seeing myself. I'm seeing.
There we
you.
go. Okay, we're good. But we had another request for the house, the date and time for the House of Pendragon event. If you could fill us in on that again, Jim.
It's June 26th, Saturday, from 2 to 4 p.m. at the Pendragon Brewery in Sanger. The Sierra Gateway Trust will be providing nibbles, and I'm sure the brewery will be providing beer, and I will have ample quantities of the book there for signing. Each copy is numbered and signed by the author. And I
Very good.
One more thing, the book is printed on very high quality paper. I don't know how many of you recall a thing called the Sierra Club's exhibit format series of books, but we intentionally chose a paper that does a very good job of reproducing color photographs, and I would have to say it worked. So I'm pleased with that. I see Pamela Coes Hill's photograph, and I'm Pamela. Thank you. I think we did your photo.
Yeah, they look beautiful from what I
Anyway.
can see, and I'll be happy to get my copy. Yes.
Okay.
Good job.
then,
Good job on the printing. That's really important to get a good printer, and it looks like you excelled.
Well, there are a few color photographs, none of yours, none of Henry's, that are a little darker than I would have preferred. But on balance, it's beautiful.
Okay. And we just got another thank you for the presentation, and looking forward to purchasing. So there's another sale for you, Jim.
Thank you all.
But if that's about all anybody has, I'll go ahead and close out for tonight. Again, Jim, thank you so much. I appreciate you letting us in on not only the contents, but the research process and what you had to go through to get this done. It's a fascinating story on the outside and on the inside track as well. And I certainly enjoy it enjoyed it, and I know everybody else did too. So with that, I'll go ahead and we'll depart. And this is the last in the spring series of local history night for the library's Heritage Center. Worry not, we will have a full schedule for this fall, and it'll be announced sometime later this summer, but I'm working on several things that I think everyone will be interested in and appreciate. And I've got a lot of email addresses on tap now, so I'll make sure everybody gets properly notified. Jim, again, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and close it down. And once again, you've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. And we will see you sometime shortly after the summer's over.
Thank you.